I am going to show you how I learned how to fold a fat quarter, and actually you can fold any size fabric, but we're going to use a fat quarter today to make a bias binding. Now, I don't usually make a bias binding. Quilt purists will tell you that's a bad thing because having binding that is on the bias is better for your quilt and lasts longer. But like I have mentioned before, I am a slightly lazy quilter and I don't want a bias binding. I just want to quickly cut my strips and sew them together. And because most of my quilts are just wall hangings that go up on the wall, I don't really worry about having that bias binding. Now, a bias binding is when you're looking at your fabric and you have one direction where the fabric is kind of stretchy, and then you have the other direction where it is not stretchy, or if it is, it's way less than the other direction. So you have your selvage here. This is a fat quarter, so this is my selvage. This is where it was cut. Typically when we cut binding, we're cutting it this way and making our strips like this. And that's cutting along the stretchy edge. Sometimes when we cut our binding, we might cut it like this. A lot of times it depends on what you want in your binding. For example, if I cut my strips this way, then I'm gonna get these, you know, weird little strips that this is just gonna be, that is my binding. But if I want my binding to have all these colors in this gradient, then I'm gonna wanna cut my strips this way so that I get that in my binding. Now, a bias binding, you're gonna actually be cutting across, and that keeps your fabric more stable because the stretch is a lot more obvious when you're cutting across, and bias bindings are actually really helpful if you have to bind something on a curve, because that stretch gives you a little bit of give and allows you to easily kind of manipulate the fabric around the curve and gives you a pretty curved edge. So when I was taught how to cut my bias binding, I was given this little piece of paper to help me remember, and I've used it so many times, and you can see how Patty was my teacher. She showed me how to do this. So I'm going to turn my fabric over, and the first thing you're going to do is take this top corner and fold it to this bottom edge. Now, I do recommend pressing your fabric before this, but I'm just using this for demonstration purposes just to show you how to fold. So again, we took that top corner and put it along the bottom edge. So we have like this little piece that's kind of sticking out, but this edge is even. So I've got a little point there. And then my next step is to take this point down here and take it all the way up to this point. So that's where I am now. So now I've created kind of a smaller triangle and I still have this little part here. Now I'm going to turn this so that that second folded edge is at the bottom. So this is the second folded edge, and it is just straight along the bottom. Now my next step is to fold this all the way and you can see why this would be easier with pressed fabric. I'm going to fold this all the way to where this intersection is, where this point is. So you can see right there, I'm folding it all the way over there. And I still have this little edge, and all this little edge does is it just wraps around. Then what I do is I take this fabric and I turn it. And once I have turned it, this is now where I start to make my cuts. But first, this is all folded up. So the first thing that I will do is I will cut that little bit off. So you would just take your ruler, and that's okay if that comes off. And you would cut like 1/4 of an inch, just a little bit off to cut that fold off. So it is important that fold is there. And then once you've cut that fold off, then you will measure out your 2.5 inch strips, 2 inch strips, whatever you want to use for your bias. I typically do 2.5 inches, but I cut this off and then I cut my 2.5 strips all the way across. So I'm going to just quickly do that one more time. So those of you who don't want to watch the whole video, you can just watch this little part. So my first step, I'm taking this top corner, bringing it down to this edge. That's step 1. Step 2, take this bottom corner, bring it to the top corner. So to the top intersection. Step 3, turn. Step 4, fold all the way to this little intersection here. And then turn it again. You can also flip it over if you want to tuck that little tail in. I don't really worry about it. It's okay if it comes loose. It's still going to get cut along the bias like it's supposed to. So turn and trim off the fold and then cut your strips. And that is how I learned how to make a bias binding.